Ukraine's massive drone attack deep inside of Russia that destroyed nuclear bombers just exposed how vulnerable Putin is. We've got big updates on the Boulder, Colorado fire attack, but Trump is promoting that Biden is actually dead and was replaced by a robot clone, and the Libby Dunn problem is just getting worse. We're talking about all that and much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, but first, a quick announcement that over at beautifulbastard.com, I just put out a new drop for you. It's a sweet little three-piece for my fellow emotionally exhausted beautiful bastards out there. Bite the hand that oppresses you. I'm very normal and cool and chill all the time, and I identify as being a beacon of light in a dark world. All available at beautifulbastard.com right now. It's the best place to wear your feelings and support the show. But with that said, a lot we have to talk about today, starting with this. Libby Dunn is blowing up on social media right now and popping up in news headlines because she just did this Sports Illustrated swimsuit runway walk where she did a split in this itty-bitty bikini, but we need to talk about her today for a much more concerning reason. And that is that Libby Dunn has people stalking her every time she goes to an airport. Right? And for those unfamiliar with her, she's a massive influencer, she's a former college gymnast, and unfortunately, the harassment that she's dealing with, it's a major problem for tons of female athletes.
I fear that I'm being stalked and I don't know what to do. It's got to the point every single time I go to the airport, there's a group of at least 10 middle-aged men waiting for me and they harass me. It's these men that want my autograph. They have like a stack of 40 pictures of me or my magazines, and they will run after me down the TSA pre-check line and yell at me if I don't give them my autograph. It's insane. But they will yell at me and like make a scene, and the people around me are scared.
With Dunn then emphasizing that no matter where she is, if she's traveling for work or a personal family vacation, it happens just the same. It appears that it's taking a toll on her, with her, for example, sharing a clip of her crying after she landed from a red-eye flight and was harassed at baggage claim. With her also telling NBC News that these people are able to know private flight information. It's scary because they simply don't take no for an answer. In her video, she notes that she is not alone here.
And the worst part is it's not only me. Like, I remember Gabby Thomas made a video about this, and it needs to stop because it's scary for girls. It's weird.
Right, and Gabby Thomas, she's an Olympic track star, a gold medalist, and earlier this year, she posted a very similar video.
At this point, every time I travel, I'm afraid that these men, it's 3 to 6 of them, middle-aged, are going to show up and harass me. And it doesn't matter what city. They've come when I was traveling to and from Chicago. They've come when I'm traveling to and from Miami. And they have my flight information, and they show up either at the front door of the airport, at the correct concourse, or they show up at my gate, which means they have flight tickets and they get past security and all that.
With Gabby then posting footage of the men who had been following her in Chicago, and at the time, you saw tons of other female athletes like Suni Lee, Coco Gauff, and Simone Biles all commenting on Gabby's post saying they have dealt with the same thing. And with looking into this, it is not an exclusively female problem, but it is a heavily female problem. Or with reports noting things like during the Tokyo Olympics, 87% of online abuse targeted women athletes. And on that note, you've had Gabby saying a big part of the problem is that people feel entitled to accessing athletes as a whole, but especially women. With that saying, a lot of the time when we don't grant them access, they can become hostile and sometimes start to harass. And so, unfortunately, the kind of main headline to this story is same shit, different day. And I mean that both for female athletes in general, though there is a much bigger spotlight as people have been paying more and more attention to female sports, but also, for Dunn herself. Back in December of 2021, she had a stalker that threatened to shoot up her school. As far as what happens from here, we'll have to wait to see. But then, next up, in just massive news, a man in Boulder, Colorado with a makeshift flamethrower reportedly yelled "Free Palestine" and threw Molotov cocktails at a group that was gathered to raise attention for hostages captured by Hamas in 2023. Right, and so we have to talk about this, especially because it happened just a week after you had a guy yelling "Free Palestine" shooting 2 Israeli embassy staffers outside of a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C. In this case, though, no one was killed, though 8 people were hospitalized with injuries ranging from minor to serious, one of which was reportedly a survivor of the Holocaust. And so with all that, as far as what we know right now, it reportedly happened near the end of a weekly event that was organized by a group by the name of Run for Their Lives, which, as I said, is a group dedicated to drawing attention to the hostages still in Gaza, of which there might be about 21 still alive, with police saying they started getting calls around 1:26 p.m. local time about a man with a weapon and people being set on fire. And then, after the initial attack, the suspect reportedly went behind some bushes and then re-emerged and threw a Molotov cocktail, but then apparently accidentally caught himself on fire as he threw it, with him then taking off his shirt and what appeared to be a bulletproof vest before the police arrived. And so in images and video that are circulating online, you can seemingly see the shirtless suspect holding what appears to be a Molotov cocktail. Right? And that is, you can also see a woman on the ground who appears injured and people surrounding her and a man pouring water on her body, with there then finally being footage of the police rushing to the scene and arresting this guy. A guy that the authorities have since said they believe acted alone, with police saying they've since discovered 14 unlit Molotov cocktails cocktails and a backpack weed sprayer filled with gasoline as well as xylene, which is a colorless and highly flammable substance. You also have the FBI saying that the man confessed to the attack after being taken into custody, and he told investigators that he wanted to kill all Zionist people and that he would do it again. And then with that, he actually said that he'd been planning to conduct the attack for a year, but he was waiting for his daughter to graduate. And so then with all that, you have the man now facing both federal hate crime as well as multiple state felony charges, with Attorney General Pam Bondi announcing the hate crime charge and adding, "This vile anti-Semitic violence comes just weeks after the horrific murder of 2 young Jewish Americans in Washington, D.C. We will never tolerate this kind of hatred. We refuse to accept a world in which Jewish Americans are targeted for who they are and what they believe." Right? And of course, that's the same kind of sentiment that we've seen across the political spectrum, with us seeing, for instance, AOC writing, "I am horrified by last night's horrific attack in Boulder. My heart is with the victims in our Jewish communities across the country. Anti-Semitism is on the rise here at home, and we have a moral responsibility to confront and stop it everywhere it exists." Right? And then, as far as those state charges I mentioned, you had the man reportedly being booked on 1 count of attempted murder, 1 count of first-degree assault, 1 count of causing serious injury to an at-risk adult or someone over 70, and 1 count of using explosives or incendiary devices. So then also with this, I'll say that there are reports that he's been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, but since no one has died according to the authorities, we might expect to see those dropped. That is, unless 1, something changes, or 2, there's just something we don't know about publicly. Right? And then as far as what we know or what we will know soon, you have the authorities saying that this is being investigated, and it's being investigated as terrorism. With us seeing FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino saying in a post on X, "This act of terror is being investigated as an act of ideologically motivated violence based on the early information, the evidence, and witness accounts. We will speak clearly on these incidents when the facts warrant it." Right? And as far as who this guy is, he's reportedly 45 years old and an Egyptian national, with then DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin claiming he is illegally in our country and saying that he entered the country in August of 2022 on a non-immigrant visa that expired in February of 2023. With her then noting that he filed for asylum in September of 2022, which is a month after his arrival. And there you have experts saying that U.S. law does provide arriving asylum seekers the right to remain in the United States while their claim for protection is pending, with the USCIS noting that individuals are generally eligible to apply for employment authorization when their asylum application has been pending for 180 days. And with that, you had Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, also claiming that the suspect was an illegal alien, but also acknowledging that the Biden administration actually gave the man a work permit, with Miller adding, quote, "Suicidal migration must be fully reversed." But then also, beyond the effort by the Trump administration to tie this issue to illegal immigration, it's also obviously been widely condemned as an act of anti-Semitism. And with that, you also had Trump condemning the attack on Truth Social and using it to justify his immigration policies, writing, "This is yet another example of why we must keep our borders secure and deport illegal anti-American radicals from our homeland." And then you had the White House press secretary further warning that anyone pushing anti-American values and especially engaging in acts of violence will not be allowed to remain in the country, and adding, "Your visa will be revoked and you will be deported." And then outside of the US, you had Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu saying in a statement that the victims were attacked simply because they were Jews, and adding, "The anti-Semitic attacks around the world are a direct result of blood libels against the Jewish state and people, and this must be stopped." Right? And then with that, as we talked about with the attack in DC last month, we've seen him and others seemingly trying to link what happened to support for Palestine in general, or opposition or criticism to Israel's actions in Gaza. Though of course, you have people in response saying that one person's actions don't represent a whole group of people or an entire movement. And then actually with that, one of the women who was gathered to raise attention for the hostages, she said that she was Jewish on her father's side and has supported the Palestinian cause for more than 40 years. And at the scene, she said that she was actually worried that she was going to be accused of helping the suspect because she was wearing a pro-Palestinian shirt. As we wait to see what comes from the investigation, I think what is not up for any sort of debate is that this was a horrible, horrifying event, and the monster behind it is a fucking monster. But then I've got even more news for you in just a minute. But first, if you're anything like me, you've also had a business or a project that's just been kind of chilling in your brain, half-baked and ignored for way too long. And so I just gotta say, make this the month that you finally take that side hustle or passion project to the next level. Recently for me, it was my book club. I had put it off forever. It was just amazing. Like the DeFranco book club went from someday to launched in under an hour with today's sponsor, Squarespace. Because they make it crazy easy to build a site to start selling content, courses, physical or digital products, or really just do whatever you've got in mind. You just want to post and showcase stuff? Great, but if you also want to charge a one-time fee, offer a subscription, both, done and done. Options are the name of the game, and they've got stunning templates that look like you hired a designer, and their Fluid Engine, it lets you drag, drop, customize, no coding, no stress, no excuses. Right? Even my team, they use Squarespace for our Daily Dip newsletter where tens of thousands of you get your PDS fix in your inbox every weekday. News, polls, giveaways, PDS show notes, they all run through Squarespace. So go take that first step today with a free trial over at squarespace.com. ukraine.com/Phil or scan that QR code and make today launch day. Just remember that when it's ready to use code Phil to get 10% off and let them know we sent you. But then, next up today, Ukraine just pulled off a wild attack deep inside of Russia, and we have to talk about it. When I say deep, I mean deep, deep, as far away as the Russian Arctic and eastern Siberia, with the SBU Domestic Intelligence Agency claiming to have hit more than 40 aircraft worth a combined $7 billion at 5 key air bases across Russia, with them claiming that they damaged 34% of the country's strategic bombers capable of carrying cruise missiles, which is huge, right? We're talking about, for example, Russian Tu-95 bombers, which have been used extensively since the invasion started, with each one of those carrying 8 guided missiles and each one of those missiles having a range of thousands of miles, meaning that that aircraft doesn't even have to leave Russian airspace to cause serious damage way inside Ukraine. But with Ukraine lacking similar capabilities, they've had to think differently about how to take those out. And so this operation, according to the country's security service, it was codenamed Spiderweb, and it took 18 months of planning. They were reportedly carried out under the personal supervision of President Zelensky, and it involved some unknown individuals smuggling first-person view drones armed with explosives into Russia and all the way into the proximity of the bases being targeted. And so you had these drones being concealed inside trucks and beneath the roofs of mobile wooden cabins, and then, just at the right moment, the roofs of the cabins opened up remotely and the drones flew out to attack their targets. And y'all, if this actually went down the way it has been described, this may be a huge blow to Russia's aerial cruise missile strike capability, as well as potentially being a sign of how vulnerable Russian military assets can be, even when located thousands of miles from the front lines. So with all that, you had Zelensky praising the operation as brilliant, saying it was perfectly prepared, and adding, what's most interesting, and this can be stated publicly, is that the office of our operation on Russian territory was located directly next to FSB headquarters in one of their regions. And then notably with that, revealing that the people who assisted the operation were withdrawn from Russian territory before the operation and are now safe. But then, on the other side of this, as far as the Russian response, you had the defense ministry admitting that the attacks did take place, but then claiming that only 2, not 5 airfields were actually hit, or saying that they repelled the other 3 attacks, and then claiming that no military or civilian personnel were hurt. And while that sounds like they're minimizing it, notably, before Russian officials even commented on the attack, you had pro-war bloggers, journalists, and propagandists describing this attack as Russia's Pearl Harbor, with some calling for retaliation, including, for example, one blogger with over 170,000 subscribers on Telegram writing, "This is not just a pretext, this is a reason to launch nuclear strikes on Ukraine." And there, I'll say that sentiment may also be fueled by the sudden collapse of 2 bridges in western Russia over the weekend, which derailed a freight and passenger train, killing 7 people and injuring at least 76 others. And while Ukraine has not taken credit for that, you do have Russian officials blaming them. But then also, on the note of attacks, Russia over the weekend reportedly launched the most drones against Ukraine in a single day since the full-scale invasion began in 2022. And that was in addition to them launching 7 missiles, and one of them hitting the training grounds of Ukraine's land forces, killing 12 people and injuring more than 60 others. And that is, you have Zelensky saying that Russia is now preparing to launch new offensives in the coming months. And then, while all that's happening, you had Ukrainian and Russian officials actually meeting in Istanbul today for another round of talks. So those talks, not surprising when you consider the rest of the news, they ended barely an hour after they began, with them resulting in an agreement to have another prisoner swap, but really no other progress. And so with peace really not appearing to be any closer and the war only heating up, you had British Prime Minister Keir Starmer unveiling his government's new defense spending plan today and saying that the UK military is moving to war-fighting readiness.
The threat we now face is more serious, more immediate, and more unpredictable than at any time since the Cold War. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready.
With Starmer specifically announcing plans to build up 12 new attack submarines and invest billions of pounds in nuclear and other weaponry. And one of the recommendations in a forthcoming strategic defense review is said to include purchasing fighter jets capable of firing tactical nuclear weapons, something that analysts say may be a sign that the UK wants to be less dependent on the American nuclear umbrella. And then, kind of connected to that, we should talk about this presidential election that just happened in Poland. Because Poland, they just elected a conservative nationalist candidate who's closely aligned with Donald Trump, and like Trump, he's also been seen as less reliable when it comes to supporting Ukraine. Because while he has voiced support for Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression, he doesn't back Ukraine and NATO and has questioned the long-term costs of aid. And then again, like Trump, he's accused Zelensky of what he said was insufficient gratitude for Poland's assistance. For now, what comes next? That remains foggy, both on the battlefield and at the negotiating table. But then next up today, this video of former President Biden has sparked a massive controversy. And it centers around the question of, when you watch that video, do you see a real-life, living, flesh and blood human being or a robot clone?
President Biden, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Well, good. You look good. Well, the prognosis is good. We're working on everything. It's moving along. I feel good.
Because if you watch that and you said, That's a robot clone. Apparently, you weren't alone, because on Saturday night, the day after Biden's first public appearance since his cancer diagnosis, you had Donald Trump reposting this on Truth Social, saying there is no Joe Biden executed in 2020. Biden clones, doubles, and robotic engineered, soulless, mindless entities are what you see. Democrats don't know the difference. And so, as you might expect, there were, let's call it, varied reactions to the President of the United States spreading the claim that his predecessor is a robot clone. Many expressing dismay, others treating it like a funny troll, and some actually taking it seriously. Because while it may sound ridiculous, ludicrous, Looney Tunes to you, the idea of body doubles, it's a common one in right-wing conspiracy circles, especially among QAnon. And in both replies to Trump's post and in tons of other posts, videos and forums going back years, people have cultivated this theory, with many sharing side-by-side memes of Biden and captioning them, "These are not the same people." With some alleging that before 2020, Biden's earlobes were unattached to his head, whereas now they're attached. Others claiming that his eyes have turned from blue to black since his youth, and that he's apparently gotten taller. In the past few years, we've seen an explosion of claims that various interviews, phone calls, and public appearances of the president were actually AI generated. And I don't just mean that the videos themselves were AI generated. I mean, you have people claiming that real reporters interviewed an AI voice clone pretending to be Joe Biden, or some saying that his face got superimposed on an actor's body because he didn't appear to blink or look slightly different in another video the same day. I mean, last year, you even had a Republican state lawmaker in Arizona sharing the false claim that Biden was in DC and Paris at the same time and suggesting there must be a body double. And then you had another Arizona state lawmaker reposting a claim that if Biden did have a body double, quote, "we'd never be able to detect it with the naked eye unless they want us to for some reason." But then others claiming that interviews that Biden did with reporters were faked using a green screen, or that this clip of him on the White House grounds is actually a computer-generated holographic image. And then when he came down with COVID last year, you had many speculating that he was actually dead and the White House just wasn't telling anyone. But then even after he reemerged from isolation, still very much alive, the paranoia just got worse. With, for example, NewsGuard finding that over the following 2 days, mentions of the term body double spiked 74% from the 2 days prior. Though that is, others believe that Biden was already dead long before his COVID infection. With, for example, one person replying to Trump's repost by claiming that the government actually televised giving Biden a funeral cannon salute at Arlington on his inauguration day. And all of this is, I want to note that Biden is not the only politician who has been the object of these conspiracy theories. Rumors that Donald Trump himself, as well as Hillary Clinton and Melania Trump, are actually body doubles has popped up occasionally for years. It even prompted Trump's first-term White House to call the claim about Melania a ridiculous non-story, and Trump himself calling the fake news deranged for supposedly spreading the idea, even though the mainstream press actually debunked it. And then all of this is you have things like Senator John Fetterman, right? He recovered from his stroke, and then you had some online claiming that he'd actually been replaced with a body double. Though, bringing us back to the beginning of the story, I don't want to act like all of this is equal, because past body double claims were not amplified by the sitting president himself. Though that also not the most surprising, because Trump's conspiracism is in a league of its own. Right? I mean, you have things like last year, the New York Times analyzed thousands of his social media posts and reposts over a 6-month period, and they found at least 330 of them met 2 criteria. 1, described a false secretive plot against Trump or the American people, and 2, they named a specific entity responsible for it. And those included things like theories that the FBI had ordered his assassination, the Democrats orchestrated January 6th, that they're trying to rig the 2024 election, that his enemies are puppets of George Soros and other globalists, and on and on and on. But then one of Trump's favorite boogeymen being the former president himself, Joe Biden. Even 6.5 months since the election and over 4 months since the inauguration, not much has changed. With the Times, for example, finding that during his first 50 days of presidency, he mentioned the name Biden at least 316 times. That's over 6 times a day on average. He said Biden's name more often in speeches than he said America. Biden this, Biden that, and now apparently Biden is a robot clone. Which, to close this out, 1, just is an objectively crazy thing to say. But 2, let's say it was real. That's the worst robot clone ever. Robot clone Joe Biden probably would have done way better than real life Joe Biden in those debates. I'm just saying robot clone Joe Biden might have been able to carry Pennsylvania and the swing states. So yeah, there's that. I don't know how to end this story. I'm just left thinking back to a moment in time where it would be more than a 12-hour news cycle if the sitting president promoted something saying that the former president was a dead clone. Fun times, am I right? But then, shifting gears from that, the final thing that I want to talk about today is the story about a fisherman in Wisconsin who just found a 100-year-old previously unidentified shipwreck. Right, so this is Christopher Tews, and he's an avid fisherman of Lake Michigan. And one foggy May evening, he was out on the water near Manitowoc when his sonar picked up on a couple pieces of wood underwater. And as he kept going, he came across the entire midsection of a ship about 9 feet below the surface. With Chris saying, "I've spent a pretty decent amount of time fishing and being around other shipwrecks, so I knew what I was looking at. This is the first one I've found that has been unidentified and unknown. Right, and the unidentified nature of this wreck was then confirmed when Christopher reported his findings to Tamara Thompson of the Wisconsin Historical Society, who went out with a diving partner to measure and document what remained of the vessel. And then, between Thompson and the president of the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeology Association, the ship was identified as the J.C. Ames, a massive tugboat that sank in 1923, with Thompson saying, through deductive reasoning, we were able to get to that name. It's like putting a puzzle together. And as far as the J.C. Ames, it was built in 1881 for the lumber and pulpwood trades, and it was later used for transporting railway cars. And this thing was pretty gigantic for a tugboat. It was about 160 feet long, with Thompson even saying that it was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, tugboat on Lake Michigan. Though eventually, the ship became so dilapidated that it could no longer be repaired, and so it was stripped of any usable machinery, taken out to a ship graveyard, and set on fire and sunk in 1923. With Thompson saying people came and watched them burn the ship. It was like an event in town. This was pretty common. But also, what's interesting with this is nowhere near Christopher's first experience with shipwrecks. In fact, he was first exposed as a kid when his step-grandmother spent her retirement going hunting for shipwrecks. And in fact, back in 2015, she famously found 3 shipwrecks in 3 days, with Chris saying, "It was definitely my first stepping stone to learning about this. As I've grown older, it's been something I admire more." And Thompson adding, "This is sort of ingrained in his roots. It's pretty amazing." And then, as far as the J.C. Ames, you have archaeologists with the Wisconsin Historical Society planning to list it on the State Register of Historic Places. Also, they're hoping to eventually secure a spot on the National Register of Historic Places. And then on top of that, considering how intact the ship is and how shallow it's sitting, Thompson actually believes that it could become a popular tourist destination on Lake Michigan. Saying these kinds of discoveries are always so exciting because it allows a piece of lost history to resurface. It sat there for over 100 years and then came back on our radar completely by chance. You know, in a world where it constantly falsely feels like everything's known and there's no such thing as a mystery or an undiscovered thing, that's not true. Sometimes metaphorically and sometimes literally, it can be just a few feet beneath the surface. But that, my friends, is where we're gonna wrap today's show up. Of course, anything and everything you wanna sound off on, I'd love to hear from you in those comments down below. I love seeing the conversation there. But regardless, just remember, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.